All right, let's jump into this deep dive into G.K. Chesterton's Orthodoxy. You've given us some really fascinating excerpts, and I'm excited to kind of dig in and see what we can pull out of this. It explores the relationship between Christian theology and the world, but in a way that's anything but predictable.
Yeah, Chesterton really wasn't one for dry theological treatises, was he?
No, not at all.
Orthodoxy is much more of a personal journey. It's written with that signature wit and paradoxical style he's known for. He's exploring his own path to faith and these kind of surprising truths that he uncovered along the way.
Yeah, and I think it's important to say right off the bat, we're not here on some kind of mission to convert anybody.
Right.
We're really just diving into these ideas to see what makes orthodoxy so thought-provoking, even for people who might not identify as Christian at all.
Absolutely. I think that's key here.
Yeah.
Chesterton was a master at challenging conventional thinking.
Yeah.
He forces us to see the world from a completely fresh perspective.
Yeah, and he does that right from the get-go, like right out the gate. He tackles this idea, this very common idea, that success really hinges on believing in yourself. But then he throws this curveball. He says, true self-confidence is actually pretty rare.
Yeah, it's captivating how he uses that analogy of the lunatic asylum, isn't it?
Yeah, tell me about that.
He describes those individuals who possess absolute unwavering belief in themselves, almost to the point where it's detached from reality.
So is he saying that the people who are most certain about themselves might actually be the furthest from the truth? It's like it makes you stop and think, are there things that we believe so strongly that we're totally blind to other perspectives?
Precisely. He's challenging us to examine our own kind of unshakable beliefs, Could our convictions, even the ones that seem completely logical, be missing a piece of the puzzle? Can we be just as out of touch with reality as those people in the asylum?
Right. Yeah. It's a bit unsettling, but also really, really intriguing. And this kind of leads us to his exploration of what he calls Christianity's wild truth, right? Where he argues that critics often misinterpret and misunderstand Christianity. They even contradict themselves in their critiques.
Yeah. He points out how people accuse Christianity of being both too pessimistic and too optimistic, too restrictive and too liberating. It's almost like they're trying to force it into this neat little box that it just won't fit into.
Right. It's like, oh, it's too doom and gloom, or, oh, no, it's too naively cheerful. They're almost describing completely different things.
It really raises this important question. If Christianity is so prone to misinterpretation, what does that tell us about the nature of truth itself? Could it be that truth, like Christianity, is far more complex and full of contradictions than we'd prefer?
Oh, so maybe we need to get more comfortable with this idea that things aren't always black and white. I'm curious, what do you make of his fairy godmother philosophy? It's like he's saying we should approach the world with a sense of childlike wonder and just be prepared for the unexpected.
Absolutely. He really did learn from fairy tales to expect a world that's both wild and wonderful, full of these unexpected twists and turns.
Yeah, and he's got that lovely anecdote, right, about his childhood nurse who instilled this wisdom in him. And he contrasts her perspective with what he saw as the errors of modern thinking, the focus on cold, hard facts at the expense of imagination.
Yeah, it's refreshing to hear someone champion the power of imagination in a world that can feel so fixated on logic and reason,
Absolutely. It makes me think of that saying, like, sometimes the most profound truths come from the most unexpected places, right? It's like he's suggesting that embracing uncertainty and wonder can actually lead us to a deeper understanding of reality.
Exactly. He's encouraging us to be open to possibilities that might not fit neatly into our preconceived notions.
Yeah, and then he goes on to make this fascinating argument that limitations, rules, even something like dogma can actually be liberating. And he uses that analogy of monogamy. The idea that focusing on one person deepens the relationship rather than restricting it. It seems counterintuitive, but it makes you think.
That's Chesterton for you.
Yeah.
Always challenging conventional wisdom. What's interesting here is how he flips the script on the modern idea that freedom equals unlimited choices. He proposes that true freedom might come from accepting and working within boundaries, from finding fulfillment in commitment rather than constantly chasing after new options.
Yeah, it's a thought-provoking idea, isn't it? I mean, look at us. We have endless choices today, from streaming services to career paths. But does this constant pursuit of more always lead to happiness?
He seems to be suggesting that maybe it doesn't. Maybe genuine fulfillment comes from choosing to cherish what we have, and focusing our energy on that.
It makes you wonder if the limitations we perceive are actually the key to unlocking a deeper kind of freedom. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it certainly makes you question those assumptions we have about freedom, right? Like we often just equate freedom with having no boundaries, but what if those boundaries are actually, the very things that give our lives shape and meaning?
Yeah, it's a really interesting way to think about it. And I'm also, I'm intrigued by this idea of dogma being liberating. It feels kind of counterintuitive at first, but the way Chesterton explains it, it starts to, make a little more sense.
Right. He's not advocating for blind faith or unthinking acceptance, of course. What he's getting at is that idea of having a set of uh, core principles, a kind of moral compass
Yeah.
that can actually free us from the tyranny of constantly having to figure everything out from scratch.
Right. So it's kind of like saying, instead of feeling totally overwhelmed by endless choices and moral dilemmas, having a firm foundation, a set of guiding beliefs can actually simplify our lives and make us, more decisive.
Exactly. And it allows us to move through the world with more confidence and purpose, knowing that our decisions are rooted in something deeper than just our own, fleeting whims.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so let's talk about this concept of eternal revolution. It seems like Chesterton is seeing Christianity not as a force for preserving the status quo, but as a catalyst for ongoing change, and renewal.
Yes, he saw Christianity as this force for constant improvement, a continuous striving towards a better world. And what's interesting is that he believed that this striving was fueled by a fixed and unchanging ideal.
So it's not just about changing things for the sake of change. There's a specific direction, a goal in mind.
Right. He believed that Christianity held this vision of a world restored to its original goodness.
Yeah.
Like the Garden of Eden. And this vision acts as a blueprint, a standard against which we can measure our present reality. So for Chesterton, progress isn't about rejecting the past, but about reclaiming something that has been lost.
That's very different from the idea of just, tearing everything down and starting from scratch, this kind of revolution.
Exactly. It's about constantly reforming and refining, always striving towards a more just and beautiful order. And Chesterton outlines three key attributes of this ideal that fuels this eternal revolution.
I'm all ears.
First, he says, this ideal must be fixed and unchanging, like that vision of Eden we talked about. It can't just be a reflection of current trends or popular opinion. There has to be this timeless quality to it.
So what's considered, good and true shouldn't just shift with the winds of, fashion or political ideology. There's a more fundamental standard that we should be aiming for.
Precisely. The second attribute he highlights is that this ideal needs to be composite. By that, he means it should represent a complex balance of virtues and values. It's not just about one idea triumphing over others, but about a harmonious integration of different elements.
So it's not just about, justice, for instance, but about finding the right balance between justice and mercy, or maybe, between individual freedom and the common good.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that reality is complex and that a truly good society needs to embrace that complexity. And the third attribute Chesterton points to is the need for constant vigilance against the abuse of power and privilege.
And that feels particularly relevant, today, with so much discussion about, systemic injustice and inequality.
It certainly does. Chesterton was acutely aware of how even the best intentions in systems can become corrupted over time. He saw as this constant human struggle. And that's why he believed this eternal revolution is so vital. It's a way to continually check our tendency to stray from the ideal, to let power corrupt and to settle for less than what's truly possible.
It's interesting that he uses the word revolution to describe this ongoing process of reform and renewal. It suggests like a kind of radical commitment to constantly challenging the status quo, even when things seem to be going, relatively well.
And he wasn't just talking about political or social structures.
Yeah.
He believed this applied to our personal lives as well. We need to be constantly examining our own beliefs and behaviors,
Yep.
making sure they're aligned with that unchanging ideal.
So it's not just about changing the world out there, but also about a continual process of inner transformation.
Absolutely. It's about striving to become, better versions of ourselves, more loving, more compassionate, more just in all aspects of our lives.
That's a pretty tall order. It seems like a lifelong journey, not a destination you ever really truly arrive at.
I think that's the point. For Chesterton, the journey itself is the reward. It's in the striding, the continual process of growth and renewal that we find true meaning and purpose.
Okay. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on Chesterton's views on authority and adventure. It seems paradoxical, right? That he could advocate for both embracing authority and maintaining a sense of adventure and free thought.
That's a great observation. And again, it comes down to Chesterton's ability to find the truth in seemingly contradictory positions.
Mm.
He argued that true adventure actually arises from having a fixed point of reference, a kind of compass to guide our explorations.
So it's like saying, you need a map if you want to really explore uncharted territory. Without it, you're just wandering aimlessly.
Exactly. He used this vivid analogy of a child exploring a garden. Knowing the rules of the garden, where the boundaries are, and what's safe to touch, actually enhances the child's sense of wonder and discovery.
It's so counterintuitive, but it makes sense. If you know that basic framework, the boundaries, you're actually freer to explore within those boundaries. You're not constantly worrying about getting lost or getting into trouble.
Precisely. And I love how he connects this to the idea of dogma. He suggests that those core beliefs that provide a framework for understanding the world can actually be liberating.
So having a set of guiding principles, a moral compass, can free us from the tyranny of constantly having to figure out what's right and wrong in every situation.
Yeah.
It's like having a shortcut to making good decisions.
Exactly. It's about having a foundation that allows us to make decisions with clarity and conviction, to navigate the complexities of life with a sense of purpose.
It seems like Chesterton's challenging us to rethink our assumptions about freedom. It's not just about having no boundaries, but about knowing which boundaries are worth pushing against, which rules are worth breaking. That sounds like a much more interesting kind of adventure.
It certainly does. It's a call to engage with the world with both a sense of wonder and a discerning mind, to embrace that tension between tradition and innovation.
And it makes me think about his idea of the romance of Orthodoxy, this idea that embracing seemingly old-fashioned ideas like tradition and faith can actually lead to a more dynamic and adventurous approach to life.
It's about recognizing the wisdom embedded in tradition, the enduring truths that have stood the test of time, while also remaining open to new possibilities and challenges.
It seems like he's saying that having that strong foundation, a set of guiding principles, actually gives us the freedom to explore new possibilities, to challenge the status quo, and to work towards a better world.
Absolutely. And this is what he believes sets Christianity apart from other philosophies or systems of thought. It's not about blind obedience or unquestioning acceptance. It's about embracing a truth that's both ancient and ever new. A truth that challenges us to live lives of courage, compassion, and creativity.
He even suggests that Christianity is this truth-telling thing, a system of thought that has a knack for being right even when it seems the most improbable. I love that phrase, truth-telling thing. It's so Chestertonian.
It is, isn't it? And what's even more fascinating is that he challenges us to consider what other ideas or systems of thought might fit that description, what unpopular truths might be worth exploring in our own lives.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's like he's encouraging us to be intellectual adventurers, to go beyond the obvious and be open to finding truth in unexpected places.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the most enduring qualities of Orthodoxy. It's a book that continues to spark conversation and challenge us to see the world from a fresh perspective, even a century after it was written.
Okay, so let's circle back to Chesterton's idea of Christianity as an eternal revolution. I'm particularly struck by his analysis of how power can become corrupted, even when it starts with good intentions.
It's a theme that runs throughout his work. He was fascinated by the ways in which institutions that begin as forces for good can become oppressive over time. He even uses the church itself as an example, highlighting how even within Christianity there's a constant need for reform and renewal.
And he goes so far as to use the word sin to describe this tendency for power to corrupt. And he's not just talking about individual wrongdoing. He's talking about a systemic problem that affects institutions and societies as a whole.
That's right. And what's fascinating is how he connects this idea of sin with the concept of progress.
Mm-hmm.
He suggests that the very things that make progress possible, our creativity, our ambition, our our desire to make a difference in the world are also the things that make us susceptible to corruption.
It's like saying that our greatest strengths are also our greatest weaknesses. And that awareness, that understanding of our own capacity for both good and evil is essential for creating a just and sustainable society.
Exactly. Chesterton argues that this is where the idea of original sin, often dismissed as an outdated religious concept, becomes surprisingly relevant. It's not about blaming individuals, but about recognizing the inherent fallibility of human nature.
So it's less about, pointing fingers and more about cultivating humility, right? About acknowledging that even the best of intentions can go awry, that we need safeguards and systems of accountability to keep power in check.
Precisely. And this is where his argument gets really interesting. He suggests that the very things that modern society often rejects, traditional institutions, religious doctrines, moral codes, can actually serve as those safeguards.
It seems so counterintuitive, but it makes you wonder, if the old rules, the things we might be tempted to just dismiss as outdated or irrelevant, might actually be essential for protecting freedom and preventing tyranny.
He even argues that the doctrine of the Trinity, this seemingly complex theological concept, reflects this deep understanding of the need for balance and accountability.
So he's saying that even within the Godhead, there's a plurality, a diversity of perspectives that prevents any one aspect from becoming too dominant.
Exactly. And he extends this idea to human society, arguing that we need a similar diversity of viewpoints, institutions, and sources of authority to prevent any one group or ideology from gaining too much power.
That's a powerful challenge to this idea that progress requires a single unified vision of the future. It seems more like he's suggesting that true progress comes from embracing complexity and recognizing the value of different perspectives, even if they sometimes clash.
It's a very nuanced view of progress, and I think it speaks to his deep understanding of human nature and the complexities of social change.
I can see how this idea resonates with his overall philosophy of embracing paradox and finding truth in unexpected places.
Absolutely, and I think it's a crucial insight for our own time. In a world that's increasingly polarized and divided, it's tempting to think that the solution lies in everyone agreeing on one right way forward.
Right.
But Chesterton suggests that the opposite might be true.
So maybe the key to creating a just and flourishing society lies in embracing our differences,
Yeah.
in recognizing the value of dissenting voices and in creating spaces for dialogue and debate. It's a much more challenging, but perhaps ultimately more hopeful vision of progress than simply trying to impose one ideology or worldview on everyone.
Yeah, it definitely feels more, in line with the messy reality of human experience.
Right.
Like, we're not all going to agree on everything, and that's okay. In fact, it might even be a good thing.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that there's no single answer,
Sure.
to these complex challenges that we face, and that the best solutions are likely to emerge from that messy, sometimes even contentious process of working together, even when we disagree. Right. So it's less about achieving like perfect unity and more about learning to navigate difference.
Right.
To find ways to coexist and collaborate, even when we see things differently. It's a more realistic and perhaps ultimately more, sustainable approach to building a better world.
It is. It comes down to recognizing the inherent dignity and value of every human being,
Yeah.
regardless of their beliefs, background, perspective, whatever.
Okay, I want to kind of shift gears a bit here and talk about Chesterton's perspective on happiness. He seems to challenge this idea that happiness is simply about feeling good or avoiding pain.
Yeah, you're right. He digs much deeper than that. He argues that true happiness is something far more profound and enduring. It's about living a life of purpose and meaning, a life that's aligned with our deepest values and aspirations.
So it's less about chasing, fleeting pleasures and more about finding a sense of fulfillment that comes from living in a way that feels, authentic and meaningful.
Exactly. He even uses this beautiful phrase, the romance of virtue, to describe this idea. He's suggesting that living a virtuous life, a life of courage, compassion, integrity, that's actually the most fulfilling and joyful way to live.
That's such a lovely idea. It reminds me of that saying, happiness is not a destination, it's a way of traveling.
Right?
It seems like he's saying that true happiness is a byproduct of living a life that's that's aligned with our values, not the goal itself.
Yeah, he definitely flips the script on the usual self-help narrative.
Yeah.
That tells us to just focus on being happy. He seems to be saying that happiness will naturally follow if we focus on becoming the best versions of ourselves.
Right. Right. And he connects this idea of happiness with his belief in Christianity, right?
Yeah, he argues that Christianity, with its emphasis on love, forgiveness, and self-sacrifice, it provides a framework for living a truly joyful and fulfilling life. But it's not about following a set of rules to earn a reward in the afterlife. It's about embracing a way of life that transforms us from the inside out, that fills us with a deep and abiding sense of peace, joy, and purpose.
So again, it's about the journey and not the destination.
Yeah.
About becoming the kind of person who embodies these values in their daily life.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the most compelling aspects of Orthodoxy. It's not just a dry defense of Christian doctrine. It's an invitation to experience the transformative power of faith, to discover a way of life that leads to true happiness and fulfillment.
And it's an invitation that's open to everyone, regardless of their background or beliefs. Because at its core, Chesterton's message is about this universal human longing for meaning, purpose, connection.
Yeah, he speaks to something that's deeply human in all of us. That yearning to find our place in the universe and to live a life that feels both significant and joyful.
Well, I have to say, this has been such a fascinating deep dive into Orthodoxy. Even if you don't agree with all of Chesterton's conclusions, I think it's hard to deny the power and originality of his thinking.
He was a true original, a master of paradox and wit, who challenged conventional wisdom and forced us to see the world from a fresh perspective.
So as we wrap up, what do you think are some of the key takeaways for our listener? What are some of the things that Chesterton might challenge them to think about or explore in their own lives?
I think he'd encourage them to question their assumptions, to be open to finding truth in unexpected places, and to embrace the complexities and paradoxes of life. He might also challenge them to consider what it means to live a truly virtuous life, a life that's aligned with their deepest values and aspirations.
And perhaps most importantly, he might encourage them to embark on their own journey of discovery,
Yeah.
to explore different ideas and perspectives, and to never stop asking questions.
Exactly, because ultimately, I think that's what Chesterton was all about, encouraging us to become lifelong learners, to embrace the adventure of intellectual and spiritual exploration.
He believed that Christianity was a truth-telling thing, and he challenged us to consider what other ideas or systems of thought might fit that description. What unpopular truths might we discover if we dare to look beyond the obvious?
That's a great question to leave our listeners with. What unconventional wisdom or unexpected truths resonate with you? What paths are you curious to explore?
And we hope that this deep dive has sparked your curiosity and inspired you to continue exploring this rich and complex world of ideas. And if you're intrigued by what you've heard today, we encourage you to seek out the full text of Orthodoxy and delve deeper into Chesterton's brilliant and thought-provoking work.
Yeah, it's a book that will stay with you long after you've finished reading it, challenging your mind, expanding your horizons, and perhaps even changing the way you see the world.
Thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive into G.K. Chesterton's Orthodoxy. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.